Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Rhino and in today's video I have a review for you of the Pharaoh's Fury Ramses II, which is the Halloween Cold War tank that was released a little while ago, I believe 10 days ago now, so I'm a little late to the party as I was on holiday, but in today's video I have a full review of this Independent Alliance Era 2 Premium Medium tank. It's an Egyptian tank and I've actually quite enjoyed it, more so than the Bandit, which is very similar in terms of its playstyle. So here is the artwork that WoT console have put up on the website. It's got a 105mm caliber gun, a little bit of useful armour. I was going to say useless, but it actually is quite useful in terms of bouncing, especially from my experience in my play sessions anyway. And yeah, this is the vehicle. Hasn't got great gun depression, but it's got just enough for it to not be sort of unplayable in my opinion. It can be quite frustrating to use, but yeah, I've quite enjoyed it. It's got quite a nice 105mm caliber gun, a little bit derpy, but yeah, the armour seems to hold up well, and yeah, I've quite enjoyed playing the vehicle. So we're going to have a look at the price and what kind of bundles you can get this vehicle in, and then we will skip into Excel, have a look at the stats of this vehicle compared to some other Era 2 medium tanks. So we're going to be comparing to quite a few tanks in today's video. I'll show you the armour profile of the Pharaoh's Fury Ramses II, and then we'll get stuck into 4 gameplays at the end. So if you want to pick up this vehicle, and just a passing mention, of course, it does have an awakened mode as it is a Halloween tank, and you can use it in the Monster Mash mode, which is now live and up and running. So in its awakened mode, essentially, it's got the 105 and it's also got a flamethrower mechanic called the Scarab Swarm, considering it is an Egyptian tank. And yeah, it's pretty good in the Monster Mash mode. Not quite as fun as some of the others, but yeah, it's not too bad. So if you want to pick up this vehicle, of course you can go for the Halloween 2023 bundle, which comes with this tank as well as the tier 8 Roswell tank destroyer, which is the other Halloween tank for 2023, and they both come with the commanders for either of the tanks. So for the Roswell it's the Stephen Alien Commander, and it's the Curse of Ozymandias 3D Hero Commander for the Pharaoh's Fury Ramses II. So 21,300 gold for both commanders and both tanks. Then you can get this tank, the Ramses II and the Ozymandias 3D Hero Commander in the Eternally Cursed bundle, 13,700 gold. You can get both tanks, so the tier 8 tank destroyer and the era 2 medium, for 19,600 gold in the Arid Companions bundle. I had to think of what word I was using there, or you can just go for the Pharaoh's Fury on its own, 12,900 gold. So a pretty hefty price again, but you can use it in the Monster Mash mode and premium tank. If you enjoy its playstyle, I'm sure you'll make the most out of that. And if you want to purchase this vehicle, of course it's already been available for 10 days as this video is going out on the 27th of October, and it runs until the 7th of November, so you've got a little while to make up your mind. But if you want to play the Awaken mode, you better get in there quickly and pick up this vehicle. So that's the stats, the price of the Pharaoh's Fury Ramses II. We're now going to head on into Excel, where I've got the stats of the Pharaoh Fury's Ramses II. Just going to call it Ramses II for the rest of this video, as it's a bit of a mouthful. And I've got the stats of this tank here on the left, and we're going to be comparing firstly to the Bandit, which was recently released, the T62M1 and the Type 82. All of these vehicles have pretty poor gun depression, similar playstyle, a little bit of armor that can be useful, and usually some kind of higher alpha damage. And then we're going to go over to sheet 2 here on Excel, and we're going to be comparing it to some tanks that have some gun depression to see what the difference is in terms of the gun handling, the DPM, and see whether you think the slightly better sort of whole armor on the Ramses II is worth it for you. So if you haven't seen my reviews before, green is the best stat, red is the worst, and orange is somewhere in between, with yellow being my commander and equipment setup applied to the base stats of the vehicle. And I'll talk you through my commander and equipment setup in just just a little bit. But let's start off with the silver bonus of 65% on the Ramses II. So that is the joint best in this comparison with the Bandit and the T62M1. And of course the Type 82 is a tech tree vehicle, so won't have any bonuses there. But a nice big silver bonus. XP bonus of 10%, which is the same as the Bandit and the T62M1. And Commander XP bonus 10%, the same as the other two vehicles as well. So good at earning silver, and you get a little bit of extra XP and crew training as well. So now we're going to get on into the raw stats of the vehicles, and as always we're going to start with the hit points and view range, then get into the mobility, and then the gun handling and DPM. So hit points on the Ramses II, 2,800, and as you can see that is the best in this comparison, 200 more than the Bandit, and you have 100 more than the T62M1, and you have still 50 more than the Type 82. So a nice healthy slug of hit points, and from my experience, like I said at the start of this video, it has some pretty useful armour. So I've usually sort of lasted most of the battles that I've been in, even in the defeats, because it's a very, very sort of resilient medium tank, just from my personal experience. Maybe I was just lucky. Next, in terms of the view range, 485 metres view range, so pretty poor view range for an Era 2 medium tank. Worst in this comparison, 10 metres less than the Bandit, and not as good as something like the Type 82 or the T62M1, but you will improve that if you use things like vents, or you use your sort of combat rations, things like that will be able to improve that to a level where you'll be able to spot some of the other larger, medium and heavy tanks. But for the most part, you're not going to be playing a scout, so I wouldn't worry too much. And of course, you do have the True Vision system as well. In terms of the mobility, you can see it has a 908 horsepower engine, so a very strange figure there. Not quite as low as the T62M1, but it does not reach the 960 horsepower that the Type 82 has. In terms of its power to weight, 21.25 isn't too bad. It's not sort of sluggish, but it's not as good as the Bandit. It beats the T62M1 by a long, long way, but it doesn't quite reach the heights of the Type 82, so you get around fairly decently. You can use the mobility equipment. The only problem is you have to sacrifice improving your view range, your gun handling, the DPM, things that are more important, in my opinion, to the Ramses II. Top speed, 69.3 kilometers an hour, so falling just short of the Bandit, which is the best in this comparison. Slightly better than the Type 82, pretty much comparable, and much better than the T62M1. Reverse speed isn't too bad at all either, better than the T62M1, better than Type 82, just slightly worse than the Bandit, but again, it doesn't feel too bad at getting down off of those ridge lines. Though one of the poorest aspects of the Ramses II is the hull traverse at 44 degrees a second. This is miles off the Bandit, and it's even worse than the other two tanks in this comparison, so it can feel a little bit sluggish to get your sort of hull around. However, you have 34 degrees a second on your turret, which will be improved by gun handling skill, so it kind of negates that poor hull traverse ever so slightly. It's just not as nimble as the Bandit. However, it is kind of comparable to the T62M1, and yeah, the Type 82 has fantastic turret traverse at 36 degrees a second, but yeah, not too far off that, and it's not really a deal breaker in my opinion. It's very mediocre mobility, kind of what you would expect for the size of this medium tank. The Bandit coming out on top in most of the regards, apart from power to weight and engine power. So now we're going to get onto the guns of these vehicles, and as you can see, the Ramses II has a 105mm caliber gun, which fires APF SDS as its standard, as its premium, and it has lovely Hesh rounds as its third ammunition choice. The other three tanks in this first comparison, Bandit has a higher caliber 125mm caliber gun, so the highest in this comparison. T62M1 has a 115mm caliber gun that can fire 80 GMs as its third ammunition selection, so I've kind of discounted that in this comparison. And the Type 82 has a 105mm caliber gun, so the same as the Ramses II, so a good comparison of how this tank holds up. So with the PHARAOH'S Fury Ramses II. On its standard rounds, 1455 meters a second shell velocity, which isn't too bad for sniping at mid to long ranges. You'll lose quite a bit of penetration over distance, but it's by no means bad for sniping. It's the worst in this comparison, joint with the Type 82, and not as good as the T62M1 or the Bandit, which has fantastic best-in-class shell velocity, but it's not as bad as the red makes it out to be in this comparison. It's just the worst out of all of these tanks. And for those standard rounds, 426mm of penetration. This is sort of somewhere in between, similar to the T62M1's 427. It shies a little way behind the penetration on the Tech Tree Type 82, 432, but it does beat the Bandit, so a little bit better for those free-to-play players that don't like to fire premium rounds, and you get 460 alpha damage on your standard rounds. In terms of your premium rounds, your shell velocity jumps up just a little bit. Nowhere near as good as the standard rounds on the Bandit, but it's the best out of all of the premium rounds because it's APF, SDS, and the others fire heat, so they'll retain penetration over distance, whereas you have the better shell velocity. In terms of the penetration though, you have fantastic 494mm of penetration, great for contesting things like the FV4211, great for going through those thickly armoured tanks, and that is the best penetration on any of these premium rounds. In terms of the alpha damage, again, 460 alpha damage. So that this 460 alpha damage, as you can see, worse in this comparison, it's joint with the other Type 82, because it's the same caliber gun, but the other two tanks will have better alpha damages as they are higher caliber guns. So T62M1, 520 on its standard, 500 on its premium, and with the Bandit, 550 on both its standard and its premium rounds, because of the highest caliber gun in this comparison at 125mm of its gun caliber. And now we get on to its third ammunition choice, the HESH rounds. These are absolutely fantastic for firing against lightly armoured tanks, mainly light tanks, some medium tanks, and even the rear of some heavy, and also the tank destroyers that are in Era 2. You have a slow shell velocity of 731 meters a second. However, if you can make that work, sort of double your lead as to what you were giving with your standard and premium rounds, you can deal some very nice damage. 250mm of penetration is the best out of any of these HESH rounds if we disregard the T62M1's ATGMs. That's fantastic for going through a lot of armoured plates in Era 2, and it boosts your alpha damage to 570, so make use of that when you can. You can use the advanced reload as a piece of equipment to switch to shells without any time penalty, and I've done that in, I believe, at least one or two of the gameplays in today's video, or you can just choose to use it if you know you're going to be firing at a lightly armoured target next, and that of course will improve your DPM. Next, let's go on to the gun handling then of the Ramses II. Aim time of 2.1 seconds, the same as the T62M1, and it is better than the Bandit, only slightly beaten by the Type 82. It doesn't feel too bad to me, and with gun handling skills, you'll get that down to a nice level. Accuracy of 0.32, again better than the Bandit, which is probably why I enjoy this vehicle more. Still quite derpy, but it feels less derpy than the Bandit. Slightly worse than the T62M1, and even worse still than the Tech Tree Type 82. Rate of fire of 6.98, which means you reload for your 460 or 570 alpha in 8.6 seconds, so not as quick as the quickest, which is the Type 82, however not as long as the Bandit, being a high caliber gun that has 9.8 second reload. And the more important figure, the DPM, it's the worst in this comparison, 3,211, so you definitely have to make every one of your shells count. It's a little bit behind the T62M1, but not by a long margin, but it does fall behind the Bandit and Type 82 by some way, so you want to try and improve that as much as you can. Lastly, ammo capacity, 45 rounds, one more than the Bandit, but as you fire quicker than the Bandit, you definitely could run out of ammunition in longer battles. You have 5 more than the T62M1, and you have 3 less than the Type 82, which is a little bit unfortunate, but just enough for most battles. And now we're going to get on to the last two stats, the gun depression and the gun elevation. On the Ramses II, 5 degrees of gun depression. It's just enough to make it playable. It is very frustrating on a lot of ridgelines, 1 less than the Bandit. You do have more than the T62M1, which is absolutely unplayable in my opinion. I just hate playing that vehicle. And you have 1 more than the Type 82. So not the worst, but by no means not the best in this comparison. However, you do have the best gun elevation, which can be handy at shooting up at your opponents. 4 more than the Bandit's 14 degrees. You have 1 more than the T62M1 and 1 more than the Type 82. So that's it for the stats of the Ramses II comparing to tanks that play a similar kind of playstyle in terms of a little bit of armour, poor gun depression, usually quite high alpha damage. We're now going to quickly skip and have a look at what these stats are like compared to 3 other vehicles that have gun depression and some turret armour, and see what the difference in stats are. Then I'll talk you through my commander and equipment setup. And of course you can just skip ahead if you wish. Everything is timestamped in today's video. So in terms of this comparison, I'll try and be as quick as I can for you. So all of these vehicles here are premium vehicles. We're going to be comparing to the Super M48, the M60A1 Rise, which is one of my favourite vehicles in Era 2, and the Magak 5, which a lot of players have. In terms of the bonuses, you have the Joint Best Silver bonus and the Joint Best XP bonus. The best commander or crew training goes to the Super M48 and the Magak 5 at 25%. But yeah, the silver bonus is good on the Ramses II. In terms of hit points, you don't have quite as good as the Super M48, which is very well armoured, especially on its turret, but the same as the Magak 5 and better than the Rise. In terms of the view range, again, worst in this comparison, so you do struggle to spot for yourself compared to some of these hold down premium vehicles. In terms of mobility, you have the worst engine power out of all these vehicles, the same as the Magak 5, but your power to weight is better than the Super M48 and Magak 5, only falling behind the M60A1 Rise. You have the best top forward speed once you get up to that speed, and it's not too bad considering your power to weight. Much better than the Super M48 and a little bit better than the other 2 vehicles in this comparison. In terms of the reverse speed, 27 kilometers an hour in reverse, similar to the Magak 5, better than the Super M48, and only falling behind the M60A1 Rise. And in terms of hold traverse, it's actually the best in this comparison, 44 degrees a second, better than all of these other vehicles, especially the Magak 5, which has a poor 36 degrees a second. And lastly, in terms of its mobility, turret traverse 34 degrees a second, the same as the Rise, better than the Super M48, only beaten by the Magak 5, but in my opinion, superior mobility goes to the M60A1 Rise, closely followed by the Ramses II, so not too bad in that regard. In terms of all of the guns that these vehicles have, they're all 105mm caliber guns. All of them have 460 bar the M60A1 Rise, which has 480 alpha damage on its standard rounds, rewarding you for firing those standard APF SDS. But 460 is the same as the Super M48 and the Magak 5. In terms of shell velocity, you have comparable shell velocity, or the exact same as the Super M48 and the Magak 5 on your standard rounds. Penetration wise, not as good as the best, which is the Super M48 at 449, but you do beat the M60A1 Rise and the same as the Magak 5. Your premium rounds on the Ramses II are great as their APF SDS. You have the best shell velocity joint with the Magak 5 there. Same alpha damage at 460 as all of these other vehicles. And penetration wise, you fall a little bit behind the Super M48, but it's the same as the Magak 5 and much better than the poor heat rounds on the M60A1 Rise. So looking pretty good for the Ramses II so far. And lastly, those beautiful hash rounds on the Ramses II. You do have the worst shell velocity joint with the Magak 5, but only beaten by a little bit in terms of the M60A1 Rise and the Super M48. You have 250mm of pen, so the same as the other vehicles in this comparison. And unfortunately, in terms of the alpha damage, you have the same as the Super M48 and the Magak 5, which is 20 less than the Rise's 250mm millimeter penetration, 590 alpha damage rounds. But it's keeping up with these tanks that have gun depression so far. Let's see what happens now, and as you can see, a lot of red and a little bit of orange, meaning it's going to fall behind in terms of some of its gun depression and gun elevation stats. So aim time 2.1 seconds, the worst in this comparison, not by a massive margin, and it's nothing really to worry about. In terms of your accuracy, you have the same as the Magak 5, only slightly worse than the M60A1 Rise, which is the best in this comparison, and you have much better than the Super M48's 0.35 accuracy, which means that you can invest your equipment and commander setup into improving other aspects of your tank, like the DPM or like the mobility if you so wished, or using the advanced reload skill to switch between your rounds without time penalty. In terms of rate of fire, 6.98 worse in this comparison, and you have the longest reload at 8.6 seconds, 0.3 worse than the Super M48, 0.4 worse than the M60A1 Rise, and 0.6 worse than the Magak 5, and that of course means you have the worst DPM out of these vehicles, not by a massive margin compared to things like the Super M48 and the Magak 5, but the M60A1 Rise comes out on top with that better standard alpha damage of 480 with 3.5k, 3514 DPM, so watch out for that. Other tanks can outpower you in terms of your DPM. Lastly, ammo capacity, again worst in this comparison by some way, and as it's the same caliber gun, it can cause a problem in longer drawn out battles, and these are the real kickers against the tanks that have gun depression. You have 5 degrees compared to 9 degrees on all of these other vehicles, but you only have one less degree of gun elevation, so it's not all bad. But yeah, you've basically got to choose. Do you want to have slightly superior mobility than some of these other vehicles, slightly worse turret armor, and a lot worse gun depression for a little bit better whole sort of armor? It's just one of those things that it's going to have to be down to you and your playstyle. But that's it compared to the tanks with gun depression. We're now going to talk you through my commander and my equipment setup. I'll talk to you how that's affected the stats, and then we'll head over to the garage, have a look at the armor profile of the Ramses II, then get stuck into the 4 gameplays. So what do I run on the Ramses II? Well, my main build that I ran for most of my session in the Ramses II, in terms of my equipment, I chose to run the advanced loader, improved ventilation, and the gun stabilizer. And in terms of my commander, it's the same for both builds: 6th Sense, Born Leader, Rapid Loading, Steady Aim, Rapid Aim, Snapshot, Off-Road Driving, Track Mechanic, and Armour Angling. So in terms of my commander, 6th Sense and Born Leader, Rapid Loading is standard, helping out that DPM. Then you have those 3 gun handling skills to make this gun as good as possible, leaving out run and gun as I very rarely fire on the move. And then off-road driving to help the mobility over soft terrain and moderately soft terrain. Track mechanic because it's quite a large vehicle and I don't want to get caught out in the open with pretty poor DPM. And armor angling to reduce damage by 5%. And in terms of the loadout, I've only got 2 different loadouts. So the only thing that I change with my second loadout is I take off the vents and I put on the advanced reload, which allows me to swap my rounds without any time penalty, so I can quickly switch to those lovely Hesh rounds or premium rounds should I need to. And in terms of my equipment, advanced loader, gun stabilizer, they're self-explanatory, helping the DPM and helping the accuracy of this vehicle. So what does that do to the base stats of the Ramses II? In terms of my view range, if you run the Vents build, it improves it to 516 meters, and with the advanced reload, 505 meters. And with both of these builds, the turret traverse will improve to 40 degrees a second, which does negate slightly that pretty poor hull traverse. And in terms of my gun handling and DPM, with my Vents build, the aim time drops to 1.97 seconds and it only drops to 2.01 with the advanced reload. Accuracy stays the same with both builds, it drops down to 0.27, so not too bad. Rate of fire slightly better, of course, with the vents at 9.32, which means I reload in 6.43 seconds, whereas with the other build, with the advanced reload, 9.08 rate of fire and a 6.6 second reload. So not a massive difference. The difference in DPM is with the vents build 4,287 and with the advanced reload 4,177. So if you want to try one of these builds, you've got to decide whether you want slightly better view range, slightly better aim time and slightly better DPM, or the ability ability to be able to switch your shells without any time penalty. But that's it for the stats review of the Pharaoh's Fury Ramses II. We're now going to get stuck into the garage, have a look at the armor viewer of this vehicle, then we'll get stuck into the full gameplays at the end. So I'll take you over to the garage and I'll see you over there in just a second. So here we are in the garage having a look at the armor viewer of the Pharaoh's Fury, and it actually has some pretty decent armor from experience on the battlefield. It seems to bounce quite a few rounds for me, and it's a little bit of a slug of a medium tank in that regard. It doesn't necessarily look like it has good armor from the armor viewer. However, it has some pretty decent side armor, some good angling on the upper plate and the lower plate, and the turret is well rounded, and when you're using the gun depression of this vehicle, you definitely can bounce some rounds off of this tank, especially from autocannons and from some low caliber or low penetration guns. So we're going to go from the thickest part of the armor down to the thinnest and have a look at the armor plates of the Pharaoh's Fury, and I'll talk to you about what I have found pretty useful on this vehicle. So thickest part of the armor is this 280mm section towards the front of the turret, and unfortunately it's quite flat towards the front. Towards the outsides, of course, the turret is rounded, so you're more likely to ricochet at an angle, but going through this you're going to need just slightly above 300mm to be able to go through. However, at certain angles it can occasionally ricochet, and it does protect you against autocannons. Then you have this section here, 265mm, and the side sections of 240mm, well rounded, so when it's using its gun depression and you're shooting up at the turret, if it's wiggling, or if you're playing this tank and you're wiggling, moving side to side, backwards and forwards on a ridge line, you can definitely get some rounds to bounce off, especially low penetration and auto cannon rounds, and occasionally they get a low roll and you get very lucky. Next, you have the sections 230mm on the sides of the turret, but more importantly on the upper hull and the lower plate. 230mm is quite good considering the steep angling, as you can see on the upper hull and lower plates. At sort of 45 degrees you can ricochet some rounds off. You always want to try and move at your opponents, going sort of side to side, trying to get them to bounce off at ricochet angles, and it definitely can catch people out, especially people with autocannons. Just be warned, there isn't any sort of composite or explosive reactive armor to protect against ATGM, so it can go straight through the front of your vehicle, so try and bait them into shooting your side where there is some spaced armor and some track armor to hopefully absorb the ATGM round. But very good against autocannon and low penetration rounds. Just keep moving and hopefully you'll be able to bounce some rounds. Another section here, 201mm down to the side of the turret, and on top of the turret 187mm. Unfortunately, you do have two sort of viewports of cupolas there to the left and right, 180mm. They're slightly rounded, but if you're shooting at this, 200mm plus will be able to go straight through this, and they're quite easy to hit, so try and make it as hard as possible for people to be able to shoot those sections. The roof armour is 146mm there at the front, so when it's using its gun depression and you're sort of slightly above it, you're not able to overmatch it, which is a good plus point for this vehicle. You then have these 130mm sections there towards the rear and on top of the side of the vehicle, and the actual main side of this tank behind the tracks is 110mm, making it very, very good for side scraping against pretty much every gun you're going to be coming up against. It won't protect you against splash damage and ATGMs and things like that, but it definitely will help you side scrape against those 105s or sort of 120mm caliber guns, and it can be very useful indeed. Rear of the turret there, 105mm, good for penning ATGMs if you come up against this vehicle when it only has another section of 95mm beneath that, so nothing really to write home about there. The rear of the tank, 75mm, you do have that sort of spaced armour section there as a block above the top portion, but the lower portion, the lower you shoot on the back, the easier it is to pen HE and ATGMs. What else to know, 50mm of track armour, and that block there, 50mm of spaced armour over the top portion of the rear of this vehicle. Couple of sections there, spaced armour in front of the right viewport cupola, but it doesn't really protect against much. and then you have a couple of sections there on top of the tracks, 10mm, and some 6mm sections there protecting against ATGMs and HE. But yeah, it's very rare to actually hit these, and even at 6mm, most ATGMs, heat rounds and things like that will just penetrate straight through this vehicle. So the lowdown is get hold down, move around, move at your opponents at 40 to 45 degrees, and hopefully they ricochet off your tank. Very good for side scraping. Turret's pretty decent, but yeah, you can't rely on it, but from my experience, it's more reliable than the Bandit's Armour, and yeah, that's a very comparable tank to the Pharaoh's Fury. So that's it for the Armour viewer of this vehicle. We're now going to get stuck into the first of the gameplays. So here we are on Karelia in the Ramses II, and this is the first gameplay of today's video. We have spawned in the southwestern corner of this map, and I'm going to make my way to the hill, which is so important to win in the H7 location. So you can see here the mobility is actually pretty decent on the Ramses II. Pretty nice engine power, which allows us to get up to our pretty nice top speed, and I'm going to try and get to the hill without taking any damage. I pop my enhanced smokescreen, which I use, as well as the large repair and large med kit, and we've made our way to the hill without taking any damage. And we do have some support in the form of a medium and another medium behind me, as well as two tank destroyers which are making their way into position, covering that 0 line. And I believe they're rock crawlers, so pretty useful tank destroyers to have with that massive alpha damage. Unfortunately, I make a massive misplay here. I should have hid behind that rock a little bit more. I was just trying to find a location to use the 5 degrees of gun depression that this vehicle has, and it means that I overexposed, took a lot of damage, and yeah, thank God we have a nice healthy slug of hit points at 2,800. We did miss one with the APF SDS round, however we quickly loaded a Hesh, went through the Leopard 1A5 and dealt 572 damage, and we have already blocked 550 damage, so got to be a little bit more careful than I'd like right now. However, we still have plenty of hit points to work with, and we have a good location here, the high ground on these tanks in the middle, and we can try and do some sniping with this gun. And it can feel a little bit derpy, just like the Bandit. I forgot there I was still loading the Hesh, so in this replay I wasn't using the advanced reload, I was using the vents for the slightly better reload. And yeah, it sometimes feels derpy like the Bandit, but it doesn't feel as derpy, and it was enough to live with, whereas the Bandit felt like I just really didn't enjoy that vehicle because it was so damn derpy. But you're going to see me miss quite a few rounds, but also penetrate quite a few rounds as well, and it's just a little bit hit and miss with the Ramses II. But all in all, I pretty enjoyed playing this vehicle. Now we're just using the bushes in front of us and the trees to hide the silhouette of our tank on the hill. Got to be a little bit careful. But we do have a nice reverse speed, or nice enough to be able to reverse down pretty quickly should we see an ATGM or should we get lit up. So now we're trying to get some sniping shots there into tanks that are situated in the enemy base. I don't want to drop down to that 0 line, join our tank destroyer, heavy and medium, because I am a sort of one shot if they roll really high with an enemy rock crawler, and yeah, if I get caught out I can be taken out of the game pretty quickly. And whilst I got shots here, there's no reason for me to move, so we're now loading Hesh, put a lovely alpha damage bomb into the back of that AMX-30B, and they're brilliant tanks to shoot with the Hesh rounds. And we roll for over 600 there, I believe, and also set that 30B on fire, and it really does rack your DPM up when you are using those Hesh rounds. We switched to an APF SDS round there, probably because it's the further away they get, the harder it is to hit with that shell velocity, but we picked up 3.2k damage. We are up by 3 tanks, so it's looking pretty decent, and it's probably about time now that I make my way into the fold, use the rest of my hit points, and see if we can push the tempo of this battle and take a victory in the first gameplay of today's video. So we go down this slope, trying to be as careful as possible, because we, yeah, very sillily lost our... that's even a word. We very badly lost our hit points at the start of this battle. So, yeah, I couldn't be as aggressive as I had wished in that mid part, but now it's towards the end of the game. I feel pretty confident here. I got rocks to my left, pop the smoke screen again, just so I have enough time to be able to get a few shots into this enemy Bandit. We put 2 into him. He's now on 57 hit points. He's going to be running away or running after us, which means we can advance up on these ridge lines, and they're just enough here to be able to use our 5 degrees of gun depression. We're taking shots from the sort of centre and over towards the sort of western side of the map, but I'm just going to rush forward. Hopefully I can get the vision, which means I can get some nice assistance damage. I'm advancing on this FV4 to 11, trying to use hard cover where possible, and also trying to move as quickly, angling as much as possible, wiggling, trying to make it hard to be able to hit. You're quite a large vehicle, but you do get those very nice ricochets with this tank, at least from my experience. So not quite quick enough there to snap a shot into that Leopard 1, but we do get some nice assistance, and it's turning out to be a pretty decent game. And this tank just felt quite consistent in having pretty average games. So what you're seeing in today's gameplay, or this first gameplay, is going to be a pretty average game that I was having in the Pharaoh's Fury Ramses II. I didn't really have any of those massive damage games that I have in some of the other vehicles. However, it was pretty consistent at doing just enough damage to make a pretty healthy amount of silver and enough to be able to help the teammates out. So now we're stuck between do we advance or do we stop here and snipe? So I'm going to try and get a sniping shot on this Magaka 6B gal there. He gets smacked by a rock crawler, and we're going to take this opportunity now to try and advance, whilst also continually looking for a shell into this Magaka, because it's going to be the last shell we get. We snap one there on the move, and even without run and gun, it just hit, whereas fully aimed shots sometimes won't. But yeah, I guess you miss every shot that you don't take. And for the first gameplay there, we managed to pull back a pretty bad start with a nice profit with or without a premium account. Only a 3rd class, finished 6th on the team, 1.1k base XP, 5k direct damage, 1871 assistance, and we blocked 990 damage. And it's just a very consistent, mediocre sort of game that I was having in this tank. So that's it for the first gameplay. We're now going to skip on into the second one. So here we are on Sunset Coast in the Ramses II, and I'm going to make my way into position in the centre of the map, into a pretty aggressive location. So we've spawned here in the east, and we're going to use the pretty nice mobility of this vehicle to get into a position and try and catch some tanks out that are making their way into position towards the sort of north, and maybe we'll meet something in the centre. There are some tanks coming this way, so I'm pretty confident I can retreat if necessary, but I want to try and take this little hill up to my left here, see if I can take this location, which means that we have vision towards the centre, the north, and I can also create a crossfire with my friendly tanks that are sort of going a little bit further north, just trying to see if I can spot anyone up there. A little bit awkward because of the poor view range and the poor concealment that this tank has, but we now have shots on this WZ-122. He gets taken out, and then we have this enemy M60A2 who just slapped our friend. We're taking shots from behind us, so it's a little bit too hot to handle here. I'm going to I'm going to use the enhanced smoke screen to get out of dodge, and I'm going to fall back and try and find a different location in which to be able to help my teammates out. And I didn't want to get caught there, because what's happening to that AMX 30B2 Farad there will happen to me. We'll just get surrounded. I'd have to either reverse up into fire from the tanks that are camping in the enemy spawn, or I'll have to try and run away without any teammate support. So we're going to fall back, see if we can get any shots down this corridor here, and just play a support style gameplay, and it's what this tank does very, very well. You don't have the best DPM to brawl it out with tanks that have better DPM than you, because you will just get absolutely thumbed. But what you can do is just put consistent rounds into your enemy, more consistent than the bandit anyway. Still a little bit derpy, but you also have that ability to go on at the sort of mid stages of the battle, towards the latter stages of the battle. You can use a little bit of your armour, and especially your hit points, to be able to push the tempo. And when you find an opportunity on a flank to be able to sort of push the flank and win that flank for your team, try and get behind the enemy, that's what you should do. So we go for the tracking shot there on that M103A2, as our teammate in front of us made it hard for us to find the lower plate, and we get rewarded with some nice assistance as he gets absolutely smacked. And we go for another tracking shot on the other M60A2. Unfortunately for my medium tank, it looks like he's going to be absolutely blacked, and he is, but we're going to take the opportunity to poke round and get a shell there into the M60A2, which means that we have now picked up 2.2k damage, 1604 assistance, and we block 990. So all our 2,800 hit points are still intact. We can see this tank at the back. I believe it's the an AMX 30p2 Brenus or 30p2 Farad there. Our first one bounced, our blind shot there, we managed to get a shot in, do some damage, and deal a critical hit. Hopefully we damage his ammo rack or something similar. And now we're going to help out our tanks here who are fighting towards our base. That's the derpiness of the gun there. Sometimes it will just randomly go either if you aim really badly, it'll go where you aim, or if you aim really well, it'll just fly out of the reticle and do something silly like derp into the floor. But yeah, that's just kind of WoT Tanks console in a nutshell, and some tanks are worse than others. I found the Bandit to be awful for that, whereas some people are finding this vehicle to be awful in terms of the derpiness, and yeah, maybe the game's just making us pay for our sins. That's what it feels like anyway. But now we can use our hit points, come round, finish off the Chieftain 120. This WZ-122 is not looking at us, but I don't really want to be too close to him until I manage to get the killing blow. We're going to come in now. He's ammo racked, so we can take him out. Only 3 enemy tanks left, and now we can use the hit points. And I could probably have been a little bit more aggressive in the mid stages because I've still got all of my hit points intact, but it's just about picking that right moment to be able to use your hit points, because although you can bounce, you definitely can't rely completely on bouncing the enemy. And now we can go in full pelt. You can definitely ram other tanks for quite a lot in this vehicle as well. It does weigh a pretty substantial amount, and if you rammed, or if I rammed something like that 30B2 Farad or a light tank, you're going to deal some nice damage, and hopefully you'll see that in one of the gameplays in today's video. Just giving the enemy a little bit of a chance there by diving off the cliff and losing 785 hit points, because that's kind of what happens with the physics. And now we're just going to go back, try and defend our base. We are capturing their base, but he is on our base, so we know where the enemy tank is, and we have plenty of time to be able to get there. So I'm flagging attack. We now have 2 people in their base, and I'm just hoping I can make it back in time. And if I spot this tank, there's a very good chance I'll get all of the assistance as well, because you do have shots into the capture circle from the enemy capture circle, I believe. So we're going to come up here, probably to my right, but you never know. It's a Magak 5. We snap a shot in, put one into him, which resets the capture circle, and then we're just going to go for a ram. A bit cheeky there, fluoring the smoke screen, so I'm able to get the kill. However, yeah, we still pick up the victory in that game on Sunset Coast, which I think is one of the worst maps in rotation, but that's for another video. But yeah, another nice profit without a premium account. That one's a Defender Medal, Sniper, Confederate and Second Class. Finished 3rd on our team with 1322 base XP, 3 kills, 5077 direct damage, 1727 assistance and 1450 damage blocked in a 5 minutes and 35 second battle. So that's it for the second gameplay. We're now going to head on into the third. So you're joining me here 1 minute into this battle on Thiepval Ridge. Our base is in the southeast of the map, their base is in the northwest, and we're just trying to defend an enemy advance on our base from tanks that have come down off of the hill that is situated in E8, E9, and at this distance it can be a little bit difficult with the slightly slower shell velocity than on some of the other medium tanks or other tanks in general that are in Era 2. However, I don't really want to go any further forward to this, because we're just going to get absolutely obliterated from tanks that are hiding where that glut of enemy tanks are situated now in that E8, E9 location. Having a few gun depression problems here, but this light tank is coming after us. Seems to really want us, but we managed to get a shot into him, track him in place, and hopefully other teammates can take him out. They don't, but we managed to reload in time to take the Armadillo out, and now we can give him a little friendly nudge and take out his platoon mate in the Scorpion 90, and that's 2 very dangerous light tanks taken out of the battle. And now we can try and get into some more cover so we don't get shot from the hill. And yeah, we're up by 1 tank. We are pushing their base in the north west, and I'm just going to sit here and see if we can stop the enemy's advance. It's not the easiest place to defend from because they have that dip over there to be able to flank around our base and come from a different location, but we're going to fire here, and unfortunately we only track that Chieftain 120 in place, which allows us to be able to reload, get another shell, and it just derps behind. And I believe if we had that extra 300 meters a second shell velocity that some of the other tanks have, we probably would have hit that, but it just is what it is. Maybe it just derped a little bit behind. We're now going to try and get a shot into the Super M48, which is one of the tanks we did compare this vehicle to, right through the upper hull. And you're seeing here the standard penetration is more than enough to go through pretty much everything you come across, and those premium APF SDS rounds are really helpful for going through those FE4211s, T55 Enigmas, things like that frontally when you really need to sort of guarantee or almost guarantee a penetration. We're now hiding behind this rock, just waiting for tanks to appear in the distance, aiming for as long as possible. That bounces off the Chieftain 120. We're still firing our standard rounds, however I might switch to some premium rounds in a bit when the game is looking like it might become a little bit more dangerous, but there's no need to fire premium here. I'm able to sit on this ridgeline. We're bouncing shells as we're not giving too much of our tank to our opponents to shoot. There's a 30B2 Brenus there on the hill, waiting for the moment we can get a shot up into the side of his turret. We're up by 5 tanks, so we outnumber them 2-1, and now is the time to use the rest of my hit points. Go in, maybe we can get a nice ram or a little bit of extra assistance. So again, playing kind of passively for the first part of the game. I tried to take a location in the first minute, it didn't work, so I kind of just sat there and waited for the enemy to try and push our base. We set up a nice ambush with our team and it worked pretty well. So we're going to crest this ridgeline. I'm expecting tanks to be straight in front of me, but I think there is a tank that will be coming into view on our left. It is a Chieftain 120, so we do snap a shot in there, and at that distance, more often than not in Cold War they go in right. And now we're going to go for a ram on a Chieftain 120 deal, just shy of 350, get a shot into him, and he gets rammed and taken out by the 30B2 for Rad, and that Leopard did help us out with a little bit of a ram. And now it's just one tank left, M60A3, but it's looking like we're not going to be able to get there. And he gets blapped by an M60A2, and that's it for this game. So another pretty quick game there, but we had a nice impact. We did just enough damage to have a decent game with a decent profit with or without a premium account. Third class again, 4th on our team, 1252 base XP, 2 kills, 4.6k direct damage, 2.1k assistance, and again blocking a little bit of damage, 730, showing you that the armour, at least from my experience, has been pretty useful. So that's it for that third gameplay there. We're now going to head on into the fourth and final gameplay of today's video. So you're joining me here on Westfield, which is my favourite map in the game, and it is 2 minutes into this battle already. We've only fired 1 Hesh round at a light tank. Now we're loading our APF SDS rounds, and we put 1 into that light tank there for 480 damage, so a little bit of a high roll. We're trying to snipe into the town and towards the north of the map, and on Westfield it's probably one of the worst maps for a tank like the Ramses II, or things like the Bandit, or any tank with poor gun depression, because there's so many ridge lines, and we are quite a large tank with poor camo and pretty poor view range, so we're going to have to find positions like this where we can kind of go on a downslope and try and snipe at distance, use these smaller ridge lines, because in the north we wouldn't have been able to use those massive ridge lines. We do block 500 damage there, and the further you are away from your opponents, of course, the worse their penetration will be, unless they're firing heat, and the better chance you have of actually bouncing their round. And now we're just trying to get as many rounds onto these enemy tanks as possible. We're firing standard APF SDS there, but with the penetration drop off over distance with that round, we just decided to load our premium rounds, and hopefully we can get a shot into that FE4211. Friendly medium tank in front of us does get smacked. We get a little bit of spotting assistance on this tank who's hiding in the bush. It looked like it was going straight towards him, that shell that we just fired. However, we did miss, and now we're in a bit of a sticky situation where the enemy are starting to outflank us, but we're just going to try and stay calm, try and give the enemy as little of our tank as possible to shoot, and just hopefully get as many rounds into the enemy as possible. We get a nice round there. We saw that WZ-122 at distance, and we put one into him, and now we're going to have to drop down as it's becoming too hot in that location. We take a shot from the left there, so I'm just trying to see what it could be, and here's an enemy AMX-13 SS-11 TCA there. Very difficult tank to be able to shoot at the best of times, but slightly easier than something like a BMP-2. However, the higher we go, we're still getting detected, and someone is looking at us, so we're going to pop our smoke screen and we're going to have to fall back and see if we can just defend this advance. Going to have to 3-aim this. Unfortunately there, we miss on the move. We don't have run and gun. A little bit unfortunate as we 3-aim. That's where a little bit of the hold reverse comes into play, slightly slower than some of the other Era 2 medium tanks, but we do manage to finish that light tank off. It's still even, so as long as we manage to sort of clear out this centre bit, we might be able to flank up north behind those tanks and get some shells into them. So I'm going to push down here. We got our hit points intact still. We're now down by one tank, and it's all about trying to get as many of these tanks out of the game as quickly as possible, as the north is falling at quite a dramatic rate. Unfortunately for us there, our BMP-2 gets taken out, so the light tanks getting taken out in a game like this can be disaster for your team. I didn't take the opportunity to fire there, which I probably should have done. The T-72AV does miss us. Trees are falling above me, and we're going to try and get a shot into the cupola of the T-72AV. We have got premium loaded, so we had a chance of going through the whole of the front of his tank. It does go through, however, our second round bounces, because why wouldn't it? And how we are in a bit of a sticky situation. Going to focus the low health T-72AV and see if we can take him out of the game and then deal with the T-55 Enigma. So unfortunately we're tracked. Wait for the T-72AV to come into us, and then we can use this reverse speed, try and get some distance from this T-55 Enigma. We have a heavy tank above me, a T-72AV, so I'm going to ask him to follow me down here, and hopefully we can swarm this T-55 Enigma. It's not looking great for our team, and in this kind of situation it's all about just trying to get as much out of this game as possible. So we're going to go wide, try and distract this T-55 Enigma. Our T-72AV goes in on this medium tank, and unfortunately all these buildings and my very poor driving get in the way. We get a shot into the side of the T-55. He is taking fire from my friendly T-72AV. We get another shot there, tracking him in place, and the bandit takes him out, and we are down by 4 tanks, so it's not completely over yet. It just completely depends whether the enemies come at us one by one or whether they come at us all as a team, as they should do. Light tank gets spotted, M60A2s on a one-shot for all of us, so there is a chance that we might be able to get a clutch result out of this game. T-72, or T-92 I should say, comes after us. We 3-aim but just fire straight in front of him, and this is where the derpiness of these kinds of guns can be a little bit frustrating. But the T-72AV takes out the 934, takes out the M60A2. We take out the Turan 6. WZ-122 takes out the T-72AV, and now it's 2 against 4. This T-92's trying to circle me. We get one into him. We're having to 3-aim. We take him out there with a nice swing of our barrel, and now I'm asking for help from my friendly medium tank. Unfortunately for us, this Leopard 1A1 is coming at us, but we just quickly snap the shot in there. We bounce the WZ-122, showing you the resilience of the Pharaoh's Fury Ramses II. And what really killed me in this situation was that bounce there on the WZ-122. Then we get tracked just as we fire, meaning that one of the shots doesn't go into this WZ. We're having to reverse out of harm's way, but there's not really anywhere else we can go, so we're going to have to get one more shot into this WZ. Angle up, he hits our tracks, again bouncing damage, and we're just trying to get this reload in to take out this WZ, which we do. It's now 2 versus 1. I'm going to try and kite this 30B2. Unfortunately for us, the 30B2 is quicker than us, and the bandit didn't get into a position, or wasn't able to be able to get a shot in on this tank. So that's it for our role in this gameplay. Unfortunately for us, it's looking like it's probably going to be a loss. I'm going to leave you here as we watch this bandit try and take this one down for the team. It's going to be one of those situations where it's just going to be ring around the rosy for quite a while. So I'll leave the gameplay up for you to watch. I'll stop the commentary and then I will continue the commentary at the end to see how we got on. So unfortunately that was a defeat there on Westfield. It took quite a long time for that one to end. We finished with a profit with or without a premium account, but only a small profit without a premium account because we fired quite a few premium rounds. 993 base XP, 6 kills, 6.3k direct damage, 1421 assistance, blocking 2000, showing you it's quite a bit of a brawler of a medium tank. Nice healthy slug of hit points. The gun's decent enough. There are definitely better medium tanks out there if you want something more competitive. Tanks with gun depression are far easier to play, but it's by no means a bad tank. In my opinion, better than the Bandit. a little bit derpy, probably not worth the full price, but of course that is up to you and whether you like the look or the playstyle of this tank. So I hope that today's video has been entertaining and or useful to you. Please leave a like if it has been. It really helps the channel out, and please leave a comment what you think of this tank. And until next time, I'll see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.